Welcome to Dark Disney. Tonight, we uncover the shadowy corners of the Magic Kingdom. This is Dark Disney.
Basketball Illuminati says the jar in yuppie ducks. Is it Disney mind control? Is this MK Ultra Deluxe? Basketball Illuminati says the jar in yuppie ducks. Is it Disney mind control? Is this MK Ultra Deluxe? Occult Disney, go wish upon a star. Occult Disney, Chernobyl to Jafar. Occult Disney, go wish upon a star. Occult Disney, Chernobyl to Jafar. Occult Disney, Tiny Glen Pinocchio. Occult Disney, as above so below. Pinocchio seeks fun on Pleasure Island, where traffickers need kids for the mines. Captain Hook, a lost boy in Neverland, saving kids from Peter Pan's designs. Nemo fails to survive a barracuda. In Latin, nobody means no one. Snow White never took another breath. Her prince, the angel of death, has come. Occult Disney, we go from real to real. Occult Disney, Bohemian Grove and no more. Occult Disney, Tiny Glen Pinocchio. Occult Disney, as above so below. Occult Disney, please enjoy the show. Occult Disney. Occult Disney.
Welcome to the Occult Disney podcast, where we look at all the secrets behind the curtain and pay no attention to them. There, I paraphrased. I got the real line, right on my screen. But it's me here. It's Matt. It's Evil Mouse there. Thomas is the Evil Mouse for a little while at least.
That's me. That was all I'm going to give you.
That's all you're going to give. Okay.
You're just getting a tiny little taste. And aside, if you're listening, you didn't get to enjoy how creepy that was.
Right. You can go on YouTube and it's 5 seconds of creepiness. 25 if we're being or 22 probably if we're being very specific. But that's where we are. It's a return today. It is a return to Oz. We are ending October here. We're ending our dive into Dark Disney. So the question on everyone's minds, is this actually the darkest one? How do you feel?
And the answer to that is no.
No. Okay.
All right.
See you next time. Head full of rooms does a lot for me. Head full of rooms. Room full of heads. Room full of heads does a lot for me. That's going to be in some nightmares, I'm sure.
Fair point. I think I actually saw this one a few times as a kid. It didn't really creep me out, but I do remember that's where that weird nightmare came from. It was like, oh, it was this movie. And I definitely remember, I remember TikTok a lot. And let me just get this one out of the way because it's been festering in the back of my head. But Return to Oz, a story ahead of its time, where a mentally challenged young girl with a cock decides that she's going to go to another land and invents TikTok.
Yes, I was definitely giggling every time they said TikTok. And then I looked up, it is that spelling. So that is how you spell his name. I've probably read the book. I actually did read like a good 5 or 6. There's like 20 or 25 of the Oz books, right? I've read a good half dozen of them, I think.
Yeah, and I guess this is worth stating up front here. This movie isn't just some random surreal fever dream that someone pieced together. This is arguably one of the more accurate adaptations of Wizard of Oz and all the accompanying stories.
Well, the second and third books specifically, Ozma of Oz, and I forgot what the third one is because I'm not looking at it at the moment. But here we go. Well, it says mainly Ozma of Oz, but I think they, through the Looking Glass style, brought in some other stuff from the third book or something. And TikTok's from a completely different book way later. So it's a bit of a mishmash.
The Gnome King is an amalgamation of a bunch of different Gnome Kings because it's like a title more so than a character. They kind of combined all the different Gnome Kings into this one guy.
So when I was a kid, they showed The Wizard of Oz. Was it on Halloween? Maybe it was on Halloween.
This movie takes place on Halloween. They specifically say within the movie it takes place on Halloween, so I assume that it's kind of a Halloween movie.
Well, I'm talking about the original Wizard of Oz, the late 30s MGM Wizard of Oz. I think on Atlanta stations, at least, they were playing that every Halloween, because I remember trick or treating, and then us went, oh, we want to go see the Wizard of Oz too, because that Star Wars, Star Wars and Wizard of Oz, they'd show on TV once a year, and I'd always catch the showings until I was like 10 years old or something, and had the videotape or whatever.
That said, the original Wizard of Oz has way more opportunities to exploit and commercialize that for Halloween. This one seems like it has a limited amount of costumes compared to the first one. Like, there's a lot of the characters in this one would not have costumes unless you got very elaborate and big with them.
Yeah, I think I avoided Return to Oz because as a kid, I know as an adult it's probably more accurate, but as a kid I'm like, this looks weird and off-brand and I don't like it. Where's the Tin Man? Why is this big fat weird thing here now? And it's all
this
brown.
Wasn't in my Happy Meal toys. This doesn't
90% of the movie is like, rust brown and tin colored. It's right at the end. You're like, oh, they actually can recreate the look of the original movie. They just didn't bother until the last scene, which now I appreciate. That's great. But as a kid, that was like, I can't do that. I'll just watch The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, it definitely does not have the same sort of dopamine hitting like sensation where you're just constantly being amazed by all the colors and the song. This one doesn't have any songs either at all, right?
No, there's no merriment in their soul in this movie.
So it definitely feels like a completely different movie outside of the franchise you'd expect. I can only imagine how many people showed up to see this without having any background on the book or anything. And
Dorothy's been awake for weeks. She's not singing.
This is almost like a non-musical Joker 2 in that regard. You're like, wait a minute, what happened to the Wizard of Oz movie? What is this?
I guess we'll lay down a little background that Disney got the rights for The Wizard of Oz in the 50s, which included all the books except for, I believe, the first one. I think they could not actually remake The Wizard of Oz, but they're like, we got 20 other books. So there's actually video footage from the 50s from the Disneyland show of Disney on set with the Mouseketeers in costume for what was going to be the Rainbow Road to Oz that never materialized for whatever reason. So come 1980, they're about to lose the rights. And the director, William Murch, who this is the only film he directed. So he was a major sound designer. He did like The Godfather, American Graffiti. He won an Oscar for doing Apocalypse Now, both versions. So, but he came to Disney and proposed, hey, I want to make an Oz movie. And at the time, they're like, yes, make an Oz movie. We're about to lose the rights. It's like when Sony makes a Spider-Man movie now, So
that would be a great thing to have in your calendar to like know when all the rights are going to be given up on certain studios. So you could just like float that idea. Hey, just by the way, I was thinking about making a movie on this thing. It's about to expire. And then I guess they're more inclined.
Now, one of the more expensive things they had to do here is they didn't have to pay MGM because it's, I think, the books are, maybe they were in public domain or whatever by this point, which why would they need the rights? Sorry, I'm thinking out loud here, but there was a rights thing. They did have to buy the rights from MGM for apparently an undisclosed large sum for the ruby slippers, because that's an MGM creation. In the book, they are silver slippers. Now, if I was a Disney exec, I'd probably be in the room being like, silver slippers, more accurate, cost less, do the silver. Maybe that's less fun. I don't know.
Unless I missed something, I'm searching my memory, which is not great these days. But they only seem to mention the ruby slippers in this movie. Do we actually see them at some point visually?
Yeah, you get a shot of the Gnome King wearing them, which is fantastic. And then at the end, Ozma's wearing them and clicks Dorothy home. Dorothy does not wear them in this movie. So Ozma and the Gnome King do. But they're quick shots. Maybe you were, blinking.
Money well spent, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't even see them unless you're like paying very close attention.
I was paying close attention. I did not synchro view on this. I think I was mentioning you before you hit record. My folks are in town. We've been watching the new Shogun, and there's nothing in common between Return to Oz and Shogun whatsoever. Okay, well you have the British sailor in a strange land, but that's really tenuous, and I'm not even willing to push that forward as an actual comparison.
This one doesn't need too much synchronicity to compare at least with something, just because the writer Frank Baum, he basically was a theosophist. He was all up in Madame Blavatsky. Maybe not literally, but at least the sort of the
Maybe
philosophy and like the occult teachings that she, he was down when she unveiled Isis, if you know what I'm saying. But I guess that a lot of the original premise and all this, that's one of the most obvious correlations, is that all of this is about gaining consciousness and going through these different sort of levels and dimensions, which we'll get into. My favorite one that I have to always mention, which doesn't apply to this movie as much, but it was the whole Federal Reserve aspect, that the yellow brick road is the gold standard, and that the Emerald City with the green and opium of the masses is really greenbacks. It's this fiat currency. That's my favorite by far, always will be. Although this one definitely leans way more into theosophy and maybe like a more occult, rough around the edges Rosicrucianism.
Yeah, I read the books like really late, like around age 18 or 20. I think I was actually in university or something when I read the Oz books. And I was coming from hey, he was actually making economic statements. At age 18, 20, I hadn't really worked out the whole theosophy angle yet. I was definitely not thinking about that, but I was thinking about the economics when I was reading Baum's book, at least being aware that's not just like some random fantasy, which is why I was reading several of them.
But that's kind of, according to Manly Palmer Hall I'm searching my brain. I believe it's called Occult Anatomy is the book. But in that book, he makes a really great case that really important works that stick around for a while and have like really long, like centuries lasting staying power, they tend to be able to be read in at least 7 different ways. So like his example is the Bible, but you can apply to a whole bunch of different examples of that. But there's some people that will read it as though it's all geographic. The people that'll read it as though it's like anatomical. People read it as if it's literal, metaphorical. Like if you can read something from 7 different, completely different perspectives, then it has more staying power. And that's a great example, right? You can read Wizard of Oz and it can be the children's book. It can be theosophy. It can be philosophy. It can be, financial sort of like fiat currency, deep esoteric talk. And I think that that's one of the reasons why we still care about it.
Yeah, I would say the movies probably slim that down to about 3 or 4 different readings, just
absolutely,
because you can't have the details. Like I couldn't work out them, but the books for sure. Also, like when you come to
too
books,
much. The movies connect way too much so that you don't get to imagine that those flying monkeys might actually represent something else, because they literally show you the flying monkeys. And in this one, even less so with the Wheelers.
Yeah, in this one, there's the flying monkeys are over there, but we don't see them. The Wheelers are definitely like weird and punk rock, and they feel like the young ones or something. Yeah, but it made me think of the Young Ones or something as well. Do you know that TV show with it's the young British slackers living in a punk rock house in the early 80s? Great show.
Oh, I can't stand anything early and British.
Oh, early 80s. This is new wave stuff. I don't know how you feel about the new wave, which is pretty old at this point, but you want the clowns. Okay, I got you.
I like it when Britain starts embracing U.S. culture more and more.
Okay. Where does punk rock fit into that? It's got the Ramones, but then the British really ran with it,
I mean, if I just allowed to dry, you're extracting some hot takes out of me here, but like, I don't even care about British punk, really. God Save the Queen, great, don't care. Like we stopped caring a while ago. That's one of the biggest benefits of being here.
Yeah, I'm more for the post-punk myself. For me, I didn't enjoy Joy Division or Wire, but that's near here nor there. This is a Return to Oz. They do not have any Joy Division songs, but the Wheelers look like they could be playing a Joy Division song. That's all I'm saying.
Oh no, 100%. And I had to look this one up because it almost was like, are they just ripping off Labyrinth? But no, Labyrinth was a year after this came out. And there's so many scenes in this movie where I was like, damn, this looks like a scene that was cut out of Labyrinth.
Well, all the Henson stuff, Jim Henson's not involved with Return to Oz. He doesn't get involved with Disney for another 5 years and it kills him. Brian Henson is doing the puppeteering for the Jack Pumpkinhead. He's doing the voice. I assume that there's means there's a fair amount of hints and creations here. But even if Jim wasn't directly involved, because he directed Labyrinth, so why would he want to deal with this stuff, you know?
Well, like even the set design and the way that the movie starts rolling out, and the protagonist, and I could be talking about either movie right now. I could either be talking about Jennifer Connelly in Labyrinth or Fairuza Balk in Return to Oz, even though I think there's like a 8-year gap between the two of them.
Yeah.
But both of them, they slowly enter this kind of foreign world and are introduced to like sidekicks one at a time. Like you get one, you kind of figure out what their name, their ability is, what's their thing. Then you meet another one, and that process kind of repeats a few times. And all of this takes place amongst almost like this fallen, dilapidated, Gothic architecture that also has 80s technology. And even though there's no music in this one, it seems like there's like just the makeup that the Wheelers are wearing. Like I feel like they're singing a mod song, or it's like a Devo video or something.
Yeah, someone must have reappropriated some of that footage for that sort of thing. There's got to be an old MTV video that, you know, when rights were a little hazy still, right? Because I mean, even Return to Oz, Disney put out on video in the mid 80s, but then they like forgot about. Anchor Bay put all these dark Disney movies out from about 95 to 2005, and then Disney finally reclaimed their movies. But yeah, these dark Disney movies, Disney itself kind of just like dropped them for a while and let someone else deal with them.
It is kind of weird that this one is a dark Disney movie. I get it. I mean, it's about a girl that goes to essentially like a early 1900s psychiatrist, or I guess late 1899 psychiatrist, and they're going to do electroshock convulsive therapy on her to try and make her forget a very real experience that she had. So, I mean, it already comes from a really dark place, but it is really just these Wizard of Oz books, right? It's just remaking those. So if, again, on the surface, without knowing what happens in the books, and you're just like, oh, it's the sequel to Wizard of Oz, you don't necessarily expect this to be a dark Disney movie. And I guess it would have to be if it was a direct adaptation. I don't know how non-creepy you really make this one. Although I assume that Frank Baum didn't have these Wheelers envisioned exactly like they show up in this movie.
Well, okay, maybe this one is so resonant with me because this is my nightmare, where I go to a city or a park or a theme park or something, and it's just completely dilapidated and it's apocalyptic, and I have trouble moving across the city. I keep getting stuck. Like, this movie is my not quite nightmares, but more annoying dreams. Like when I have annoying dreams,
so this is
they're similar to this movie.
Top 5 scariest Disney movies for you then?
Not scariest, but resonant, you know, as far as like my actual dreams, like are similar to this movie. Maybe that's why I want to watch as a kid. Like I see this stuff at night. I don't need to see it during the day too.
I mean, the thing that I related to the most that you said is that it had this off-brand feel, and you're like, ew, I don't want to touch that. You're like, I want the real one. I kind of remember that feeling, specifically seeing TikTok. It was like, man, you're kind of cool, but also you're kind of Disney, and you're not really what I was expecting. Like TikTok could have just had his own movie, and I think I probably would have. As a kid, I'm trying to tap into my childhood here.
Millions of his own movies, 30 seconds or less. Is that the TikTok length? I'm not quite sure. I've never used TikTok. It's not on my phone or anything. I don't even understand it. I'm the old fart that doesn't understand TikTok. I understand this robot guy better, this automaton, this golem better. Where's the line between Gollum and automaton? Yeah, where's the line between Gollum and automaton? Is there a line? Maybe there is no line.
Yeah, because a golem technically it's still supernatural, whereas automaton can be totally science fiction. It doesn't require supernatural to work.
I guess the movie Hugo sort of explores that line. That's the point of that movie. But you know.
And I mean, I didn't look into the production notes on this, but some of the movements on TikTok, I assume that's a dude, which would make it a mechanical Turk more than anything.
Yeah, who's in the suit? Timothy B. Rose is the head operator. Michael Sundin is the in-suit performer, who is what? Okay, sorry. It's when I saw the picture of the guy in the TikTok suit, it was not what I expected. He looks like actually looks like an Aryan superstar or something. I mean, you know, it looks like a poster boy for that sort of stuff. That's who's in TikTok at the time.
Well, this is part of the retribution for World War II, I assume.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, we've demoted the lion to a chicken, I guess. That I didn't even know that till I was watching the movie this week. You know, I'm trying to slot in like this one's this one, right? who fits
Well, what do you
our
mean?
original friends.
Expand on that. What do you mean that the lion's
TikTok's
not
our
a chicken?
TikTok is our Tin Man, right? Jack Pumpkinhead is our Scarecrow, which means that
Okay, yeah.
the lion has been demoted to a chicken. Something I did like, and I would have hated it in the late 80s because it didn't look like the characters from the original movie, right? But now I love the designs when you do see the Tin Man and the Scarecrow because they look so freaking weird in this movie.
I kind of hate the Scarecrow. I'm not gonna lie about that. But and also I just gotta, if we're comparing them one for one, Bellini, which is the name of the talking chicken now, I kind of assume that was Toto.
Maybe a mix between, yeah, because Toto only shows up at he doesn't leave Kansas this time, does he?
Right, but she keeps Bellini like under her arm the entire time, and Bellini's sort of her tag along from like, so you see Bellini before she goes to Oz, and you see Bellini as soon as she gets to Oz. So it feels like this constant thing that never left her, which is Toto.
Oh, there is some chicken production notes on this that are a lot of fun. They had 40. They had about 40 chickens on tap. They all died. No, but they had them in pens, and each pen had a note like, this is the pecking chicken. This is the chicken that runs. This is the chicken that will attack the actors. This is the tiny chicken because Fairuza Balk, I'm not quite sure I'm saying her name right, but although she does have quite a career, but yeah, they had to give her a smaller one because she couldn't hold a full-size chicken. There were a few mechanical chickens in certain scenes. So once you include everything, there's probably like 50 chickens in this movie. And
Balk, yeah. And I have to assume that a non-zero number of these did die because this was the 80s.
Right, the production did not mention that, but reading it, I was like, how many chickens died, or shortly after, if not in the scene. So.
You don't want to be in that pen. These are the dying chickens. Like, wait, what?
The dying chicken pen, yes, and I avoid that one. But yeah, I did. I was, you never think about that. You're like, oh, there's a chicken, so they have a chicken, maybe 2 for the movie. Nah, they had 40 chickens, very specifically trained chickens, because you can only train a chicken to do like one thing if you're going to train it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't want to give yourself a bad night, don't look up at how many Milos and Otises there were in the Milo and Otis.
Milo and Modus, yes.
Milo and Modus. Yeah, and yes, spoiler alert, it was not just one Milo or one Otis.
Balk claimed that she enjoyed working with all the chickens and they were sweet, but she was also an 11-year-old girl, and they might have told her to say that. So, because I think that's from a at the time interview. Oh, I loved working.
That's one thing I didn't remember. I did not remember her as being in this movie. I could have sworn that I had only seen her in The Craft and then in Waterboy, and then I think American History X, unless I'm
yes, you're correct. That's correct. All of those are correct. For me, Almost Famous always sticks in my mind. She's in Bad Lieutenant Port of Call, New Orleans, which is an amazing movie. I don't remember what she does in that one, but have you seen that?
I don't think so. No, the ones I just mentioned, the only ones that I actually remember seeing.
Anyway, that's one of the best crazy Nick Cage movies, which is I'm giving that the high bar of crazy Nick Cage. So that and Color Out of Space are my top crazy Nick Cage movies. So
right, but I guess Color Out of Space. I know that we're on a tangent. Color Out of Space is like post awareness of Nick Cage being aware of his craziness. And then like utilizing that versus it almost seemed like he was just like pointing around a loaded gun early on in his career without even really knowing. Like it was just Russian roulette for everyone involved.
Bad Lieutenant's Port of Call, New Orleans. So you got to say the whole name. A Werner Herzog film. So it's not just a weird knockoff of Bad Lieutenant. It's probably better than Bad Lieutenant. But yeah, that's the magic spot where people were becoming fully aware that he was crazy Nick Cage and he was owning it. So it's like the sweet spot, But Balk was in that in some role that I have forgotten because I usually just go back to the scene where Nick Cage is screaming at an old lady, and I watch that one. He takes the tube out of her nose and starts screaming at her to do something. I don't even remember what it is, but I watch that scene on YouTube fairly regularly or show it to people. Otherwise, there's not like star power to speak of in here. Okay, if I'm going to have any synchro viewing, Auntie M in this movie seems like way more evil than in the 38, 39 movie. I need to look up which year that is. But that's because I just saw her in Twin Peaks being a maniac, right? As Christine. And then she plays several episodes, spoiler alert, as a large Japanese businessman. in heavy makeup. That's Twin
I didn't
Peaks.
know
It's
that.
weird. Yeah. It's fun. I think they didn't tell the other actors that was her either, so it took them a while because she's in such insane makeup. They're like, "Why is Piper Laurie still in the credits?" But here, I mean, yeah, she makes it because of that. Aunt M seems like extra intimidating in this movie to me because her actions are way more intimidating than the original. I mean, I guess they make Dorothy want to run away, but yeah, you're going to give up the dog. But here, it's like we're going to give me shock treatment. That's a little more hardcore than losing the dog.
You mentioned like no real star power, and I guess you're right. They didn't have any like big names or voices that would really pull you to, or at least that I recognized for the time period. But that said, it's actually for a movie that basically just stars like a 9 to 11-year-old girl. It's actually not bad. Like Fairuza Balk kind of delivers in this movie, in my opinion. It's not like a cheesy kids Disney movie that I was going and expecting watching it as a 40-year-old guy, right? It totally works.
A couple small hits. If you know the English stage, someone is screaming right now that I'm not mentioning Nicole Williamson, who plays the Gnome King in his full form. Legend on the British stage, but hey, I don't know much about that, right? So not a star to me. Sorry. What else do we have? Deep Roy is the Tin Man. That's kind of fun. He's in the Tim Burton Willy Wonka's Every Oompa Loompa. He's the Tin Man here, but you can't tell because he's in a suit, right? And the other people up for the Gnome King, apparently Christopher Lloyd was up for that Gnome King role, which honestly that would have been too much, I think, but it's kind of fun to think about.
Yeah, the Gnome King was an interesting one. I don't know if it was supposed to be scary or good or bad. In the books, he's essentially the big bad. He's the ultimate villain. But in this one, he almost seemed balanced and neutral. Like he knew that this is how things kind of had to play out. I know he got angry about it, but he also kind of accepted it pretty quick.
Yeah, here he's more like, I got a business here, which again, I guess fits with the socioeconomic vibe of the Baum books. But he doesn't seem, I mean, he's getting a little aggressive, but he doesn't seem to have like personal malice going on. It's more like, don't screw up my game,
It could this movie, man, I want to like start over, but maybe this movie was all about Bitcoin. The first one was about fiat currency. The second one is about Bitcoin. I don't know how I'm going to get there yet. I would need time to work that in, but I feel like there might be a connection there.
Could anyone conceive of Bitcoin? Maybe DARPA, but in general, could people conceive of Bitcoin in 1985? That's an interesting thing to think about.
It's also one of my favorite reasons when I don't think that Art Bell or Coast to Coast ever had an actual time traveler call in, because not a single person was like, I'm calling from the future. There's this thing called decentralized ledgers and currency and crypto, and you just get into it. And then it cuts out. But every time they just talk about other stuff that seems less consequential.
Oh, I love that story though. What was the guy's name that called in?
John Teeter.
Yeah. I read that bizarre like the entire diary document thing that's on weird late 90s internet pages. Yeah,
I think we've already passed, because he said that there was going to be World War III. He called it, and I think we're past it by now.
Are we having it now?
Yeah. Oh God.
You could argue that, just since America is not currently blowing up too hard at the moment, it doesn't feel like it. But other places,
it's about the friends you make along the way, though.
Yes, I haven't been to the other places. I don't know, but yeah, obviously the news tells us it's nasty, so that's we'll see. But yeah,
I've got my noise suppression on, so you can't hear the mortar shells going off behind me.
Oh, okay.
Because it is election season.
Zoom is getting good with this, with cutting out all that noise and stuff.
Well, ever since the Israel-Palestine conflict bumped up, they were like, "Oh, let's go ahead and add that extra filter."
That is the thing. You look at something like Fox News or CNN, and you're like, are they making it look worse than it really is, or are they making it not look as bad as it really is? It's kind of hard to tell.
Well, Wag the Dog. Now you could actually have Disney do your Wag the Dog movies.
Yeah. Speaking of movies that actually do have quite a bit of predictive power. If you go back, what was that, 1998 or 99 for Wag the Dog?
It was during Clinton, I believe, because he was essentially the plot. It was post Lewinsky, because the plot point was that the president had some hanky panky that they were trying to cover up with a war, along with like some other stuff. It's a great movie. And I think that maybe Return to Oz also had some sort of prophecy in it, but I watched it under like a theosophical lens versus a John Teeter lens, which maybe was a grave mistake.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to put the economic things. So the ending confrontation is go into a room full of knickknacks and touch the right one or become a knickknack yourself. Is that basically the vibe there? It's like the end of Last Crusade, right? Except
yeah, I mean, she is going around. Oh my God, you nailed it, right? She's going into her crypto wallet and she has to figure out the passcodes, and then she's converting that crypto back into fiat, therefore physical, tangible items. So the whole end plot is her finding her crypto again.
I should check crypto. I think I bought a little bit of crypto like 5 years ago and forgot I did it, as many people do. But I don't know if it's worth nothing.
Honestly.
Yeah, it was probably because there's no, that way you're not, your heart doesn't race about things you can't control. So who knows? I should look it up. Maybe I have a ton of money and don't know it. Probably not. I think you have to do it 10 years ago for that to really work.
I've got a few different quotes in here that I'll kind of get through organically. But first of all, the movie starts out and it shows that this family, and I guess by proxy, the rest of society, is fully embracing this new 20th century, which is interesting to hear, because I know that the movie, they got the rights in what, 50s or 60s, and then the movie didn't come out until the mid 80s. So at this point, they know how dark maybe the background of this premise is, but for it to be taking place in the very early 1900s, late 1800s, and this like mechanical sort of electro everything is the solution. So even the dad has got some issue going on, I think, but they're looking in the paper about this electric healing device. And this is essentially what is supposed to fix their daughter, Dorothy, because she's been to Oz, and since it's a sequel, right? She's been to Oz, she comes back home, and what we don't get to see is that everyone around her is like, oh my God, like she's got mental issues. She's talking about this foreign land and all these people that she met. So you kind of, what you don't see between these two movies is that the family is now concerned for Dorothy. They're going to bring her to a psychiatrist and sanitarium, kind of like a sanitarium for kids, I guess.
Yeah,
and
they call it electric healing, which sounds like a 10-minute long Prince track. Electric healing. Oh, you froze. That's what happened. Okay.
The other snake oil.
No, you're back. Sorry, you froze for a minute. I thought that me bringing up Prince had silenced you, but that's not what happened.
Well, it's creepy because the advertisement for the electric healing, it's in a paper along with a whole bunch of different classifieds where you'd see the snake oil, where you'd see all of like the scam stuff. So you kind of even realize like, uh-oh, these poor people are about to get swindled out of money before you even actually see anything happen.
Maybe this is maybe that's a tribute to Judy Garland, who probably couldn't sleep in the late 30s. That's all those amphetamines. Dark story, but yeah, that talk about child. And so let's at least look at that. Balk seems to have had a nice normal career as far as we can tell, where, you know, Garland went off the rails pretty quickly. Her and Rooney, children maniacs of Hollywood.
I mean, yeah, I guess there wasn't any huge blow-ups that I remember growing up with, but she definitely had some of the more extremist roles for like large movies that came out. I guess Craft, but American History X in particular. She kind of plays like the hardcore racist, even more racist girlfriend in that movie.
Oh God, yeah. Now, see, I haven't watched American History X for a while. Great movie, but yeah, now it's popping in my brain. Okay,
I wonder, after American History X and you're Fairuza Balk, you call up Disney again. You're like, oh, by the way, I'm totally available if you guys ever want to do something again.
See, I just think of Almost Famous, where she's the groupie that deflowers what's his name, Cameron Crowe stand-in character. Yeah, if you've seen that movie. So
see, I didn't even realize she was in that. Yeah. And yeah. I guess too, to be fair, maybe Disney wouldn't care right after she comes off American History X, because they're like, hey, like Werner von Braun's in the next room, so yeah, I guess we don't have that big of a problem.
No, and that's the period where Disney couldn't care less about Return to Oz. Again, they didn't even bother using their rights. They let other people run off with it. So that probably didn't matter. But anyway, that just takes the sting out of thinking about Judy Garland gets very dark. Super tangent, but it's worth mentioning because it's really funny. I do the Twilight Zones, and there was one with Mickey Rooney, Garland's regular co-star, and it had a commentary track for the episode The Last Night of a Jockey. He's the only actor in the episode. Has a commentary track. It seems it was recorded when he was like maybe 90, and it's like the most antagonistic commentary track possible. He's like, "What were you thinking when I wasn't thinking anything? They just paid me the money and I acted." And it's like this for like the whole commentary, just like really antagonistic, and it's great. So I recommend anyone that can get hold of Blu-ray or find the commentary track online to do the Mickey Rooney commentary track for The Last Night of a Jockey if you want to hear a true 90-year-old madman.
And if I'm not mistaken, Mickey Rooney is kind of the inspiration for the Peter Griffin. You're like, what really grinds my gears? And he just starts ranting about something. That's Mickey Rooney, right? That was his whole.
You might be conflating with maybe that there is some. I think you might be thinking about Andy Rooney, who was I don't think related, but he was on 60 Minutes and he'd rant at the end.
I am thinking of Andy Rooney.
I mixed them up a ton when I was growing up. I was so.
So nice which one? Who's Mickey Rooney? Where would you know Mickey Rooney from?
Big Ear Guy. He's in a bunch of films with Judy Garland, basically, and they're old timey films that people don't tend to watch these days. So being on the spot, I'm having trouble just giving you a recall on that. Boys Night, something like that. Musical films that people generally don't watch anymore. Boys Town, that's it. Boys Town. I remember that one stuck in my mind because that doesn't sound good, but the movie.
That one's memorable for even more horrible reasons than anything Judy Garland came up with. I just think of John DeCamp and Franklin Scandal when someone sends Boys Town.
Yeah, I just want to bring up a little more on what Disney was doing with this before. I have more specifics that once they get the rights in 54. For the remaining 13 Oz books, excuse me, I said too many when I said 20. It's 14. The original plan was a 2-part episode based on the Patchwork Girl of Oz. It was too ambitious for television, so they changed the name to a feature called The Rainbow Road to Oz. They previewed 3 songs in 1957 with the Mouseketeers, then got rid of the film, but they did put all of the music out in 1969 as The Cowardly Lion of Oz. So you can jam out to the complete soundtrack of this unmade movie if you want to. As opposed to Return to Oz with
if any of that made it to film for someone to just like leak that or for the vaults to open and we just get to see some of these like unfinished ideas. I almost feel like that would do really well. Just like a whole compilation of, little bits and pieces of things that were never fully made.
Oh yeah. I'm looking at the guy that did the music for Return to Oz. It just made me start thinking about that. And it's a bunch of films. Like, those are great films. I can't remember anything about what the music is like in those, which is The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, The Conversation, All the President's Men, and parts of Saturday Night Fever that were not disco.
In this movie?
That's who did the music for this movie. I'm just saying those are his previous credit. Okay. And I'm like, none of all of those, I'm like, those are great movies, but I don't think Saturday Night Fever is a great movie, but it's certainly a profound movie.
I got to say, after all the different movies we've seen, even just in the Dark Disney, this one had a fairly long run time. It was like an hour and 46 or something, but it went by because things were happening. It didn't, even though and maybe you have a different experience on this one, even though the aesthetic was like, kind of washed out in bronze and rust and rocks and sand, and it wasn't really emerald and rainbows and gold, paved anything, but it still moved along fairly well. And there was enough really strange things like, what the hell am I looking? Did they just pull the head of a moose down off of a wall and they sprinkled it with life powder and they said a magical incantation and now it's flying around with like palm fronds as wings? And you're seeing all of this? Like, yeah, I'm in for all of that.
No, I agree. It moves. I mean, that was the big complaint, at least I had, and I think you did too with the Black Hole. Is like everything in this is cool, but the movie does not move. Where here
Yeah.
it's like, hey, you don't like this room, wait 30 seconds. We'll be somewhere else,
100%. Yeah. Every like 30 seconds to a minute. If you don't like the decapitated heads, then you get a room full of gold and jewels. If you don't like that, then you get a big rock monster. If you don't like that, well, now there's like some weird inferno aspect. And then you get to see the weird labyrinth Wheeler guy. Honestly, the Wheelers are the coolest part of this movie, the more and more I think about it.
For me, it's a room full of heads that's going to stick in my head. But that's the thing. There's something that grabs everyone. The Wheelers, yeah. Again, I'm just thinking punk rock.
Is that you just tapping back into a frightened young Matt?
Probably. I do remember one of the most traumatizing cartoons I saw as a kid was Star Blazer, which is the American version re-edit of a Japanese show called Space Battleship Yamato. But there's one thing where a robot, an android, has to like jettison his limbs, and then he's like just sitting on the side of a spaceship outside in space with no limbs, and that really freaked me out as a kid. So
yeah, I guess your thing is dismemberment. That's
yeah. So this is for me. Return to Oz is like David Cronenberg for children.
Man, I'm searching my head. Was it Crimes of the Future or something? I don't remember the name of the movie, but there is a movie that in the future, body modification is done as like an art form or something, and they do these like underground, like black market meetings / art shows where you just get surgery. They'll just like remove an organ or something as performance art. And I feel like that would be a special kind of hell for you.
Yeah, probably. So let's dive into some Theosophy, I guess. Oh, the last production. This is another flop. All the dark Disney movies are flops, by the way. So just before you get to Theosophic, the budget 28 million, made 11, so fell right on its face. That's why we did not have a return to Oz.
If they had added more color in music, I would have liked it less, but it probably would have been a bigger hit. So in case you ever see John Teeter, you can tell him to pass that back again to the 80s.
What would you rather have, Teeter's car or the DeLorean? You just sit there and time moves around you, time machine style, or you're going to go 88 miles an hour?
I think John Teeter was like a somewhat boring, less creative version of just fan fiction. Even back in the day, I was always like, this is kind of lame. Like, even if this were a guy from the future, he's like bringing back the lamest information. Like, none of this is getting me excited whatsoever.
DeLorean, take care of myself as a kid now. It's fine. Take care of myself as a kid. That's what I do these days.
Yeah, the John Teeter thing, it was like a special moment in time, but it wouldn't even went viral on TikTok at this point.
No, I think the blandness of it all is what makes it somewhat convincing. You're like, well, if it's this kind of like mundane, then it must be true.
I guess. I mean, it takes a better story to kind of really sell it.
It does, but that's also part of the fascination that it is so thin and mundane that you're like, well, why would someone make that up? It's boring. So time travel probably would be mundane and boring if you were actually doing it in certain ways. So.
And I know that this movie is supposed to take place in like the year 1900, just before October of 1899. But there's so many shots, even when they're in the mundane world, that it totally looks like 1980. Like there's a driveway at some point. And even though there's no cars in the driveway, it's totally a drive. Like, all of the aesthetics on a lot of these shots, it just seemed like they didn't go that extra mile. So, I mean, they were already over budget compared to how much money the movie ended up making. So I guess it's good they didn't go all out, but it was weird. It had a weird aesthetic.
They wanted to shoot 75% of this in like, Italy and Malta and places like this and get really fantastic looking places. And then in the end, it's like, nah, you're going to make Kansas like a valley in England. I guess it's a small valley because they don't really have mountains there. But
is this another one of those movies they shot in England for tax reasons?
Correct.
Okay.
They did want to do a bunch of location for this one, but they were,
I feel it. I don't know what it is, man, but I can feel that like 80s English energy coming through a little bit. That's a little bit of the part that made it not hit as hard as it could have. If they had shot it in actual Kansas, I feel like there's a je ne sais quoi, like a hard to explain essence that would have elevated this quite a bit. You can't shoot a freaking movie about a Kansas family going through twisters and not actually do it, at least in the States. I don't know.
Yeah, here we go. And it says here, Kansas scenes were filmed at Salisbury Plain, which was
Gross.
described as a natural choice by the DP, I guess, due to it being flat and within close proximity to London. So sorry, valley was the wrong term word used. The temperature during filming was described as freezing. Okay. The original cameraman quit after shooting all the Kansas scenes due to impatience with Murch, who was fired at that point after the Kansas scenes. But then he actually had Coppola and Lucas go to bat for him and those guys convinced Disney to let him finish the film, with Lucas saying, "I'll come direct it if he screws up again," which I guess he didn't, because it's not a Lucas film. So, but in that, now you're like, wait a minute, he did the sound for Apocalypse Now and American Graffiti. That's why. So it does make sense.
So chronologically, right? She's making her friends and family think she's crazy. So they're saving up money to get her electroconvulsive therapy, which is what any good family would have done to their young 9-year-old in the early 1900s. And they actually send her to a place called Cottonwood Falls. And that's sort of like this, it's a town. I actually looked all this up. I don't know why they went so specific, but there's actually a town in Kansas called Cottonwood Falls. It was around during this time period. And it was like one of these little stop-off cities, but they actually bring her there, that little sanitarium, and they go inside and they also do like a weird thing. And the doctor is showing her this device that's essentially going to give her this electroconvulsive therapy. And he's like, look, it's a face. Here's the eyes and here's the nose and here's the mouth. And there's like a little dial that basically sets how much you want to shock them with, like how many volts. He's like, this is its little tongue. And he's like wiggling it back and forth. Like it's this fun little thing. And you as the viewer, but also Fairuza Balk, is like well aware that this thing is just a torture device. Which is kind of
steampunk MK Ultra machine.
I get, and it reminded me a little bit too of the little quarter things that you like the sightseeing post that they'll put on like a tall building or something. You put the quarter in and it's got like the two eyes and a little nose mustachy thing.
One thing this movie does that he said it would put in harmony with the original was having Kansas actors also appear in Oz. So I was like, so is the MK Ultra machine, the electroshock machine, is that supposed to be TikTok? But now she gets to turn the knobs on TikTok instead in Oz.
Kind of. I'll get to that too. But there's a weird part of that too. But yeah, so the pareidolia, that's like where you see faces and everything. But when you point it out in the movie, I thought it was creepy. Yeah, like here's your friendly MK Ultra electroconvulsive therapy machine, and Disney technically could have came out with a little IP, right? You get a little pin or like a stuffed animal that would have been the face of this electroconvulsive shock machine.
Sell that at Target for Christmas. That sounds great. Speaking of seeing faces, though, because we all see the man in the moon, right? Are you familiar with what Japanese see in the moon? And I've lived here long enough now. I see it.
It's a rabbit.
The rabbit making rice cakes. Yeah, because we were in a museum last week, and my dad's like, "Why did the guy make this? Was he high?" I'm like, because if you don't know it, it looks like, why would you make that? I'm like, oh, that's what they see in the moon. But maybe he's high too. Rice I don't know. He made a lot of incense burners, so it was steel, a metalwork, a museum display. So,
do rabbits eat rice?
Not that I know of. I don't really know why the rabbits make a mochi now that you mention it. But that is how you would make cheese,
because everyone knows cheese makes way more sense than rice.
Rabbits do not like carrots, apparently. A lot of pet rabbits have died because the owners kept trying to feed them carrots, and they don't like carrots. They can't process the carrots. Don't give your rabbit a carrot.
Where did that come from, though? I mean, they do like carrots, but they probably don't like the carrot itself. They probably like the part that you don't have to pull up out of the ground.
It had something to do with, it's something about World War II British propaganda, and I cannot remember the specifics.
It always comes back to the freaking Brits, doesn't it?
But yeah, I believe that was like in the 30s when that kind of started to come around, and then you got Bugs Bunny chomping on a carrot around that time too, right? Maybe it's World War One with that propaganda then. But something about eat your carrots and see sharp. But why would there be a rabbit? I don't know. Did not prepare to explain that one for this podcast clearly, because why would I?
Well, I guess speaking of farming and pulling up root vegetables, I thought that this was a little bit interesting, is that the real reason that they want to bring Dorothy to the sanitarium is, I guess it's partly because they know that she's talking about all this nonsense they don't believe, but it almost feels like they could have gotten over that, except she's staying up all night. She won't sleep. She'll be up until like 1 or 2 a.m., maybe even the witching hour. And then in the morning, her mom specifically says that, like, you're staying up late and you're sleeping in and you can't work on the farm like this. And it was kind of like, okay, now I understand. The parents are willing to spend this money to send her off to get shocked into working better so that she'll wake up earlier and actually do farm chores. So that feels like the actual motivation here.
See, I was thinking of Dorothy kind of being like the shaman that industrial society shuns, because she's walking into other worlds, like a shaman might
she's
do.
The Theosophist. Yeah, she's the one that's actually pursuing this like Theosophical research, and that her parents are stuck in the mundane. Her parents are both bumpkins because they only see the commercialization of energy and electricity and all this new technology. They just see it as ends to means. Like, it's very utilitarian to them. And the parents are, since they're farmers, they're obsessed with this mundane world. Their house got knocked down. They're building a new house. They're like just out getting up early and doing all the farm chores. And she wants none of that. She's like very cerebral. So I think in this case, Dorothy kind of is your Madame Blavatsky in a way. Like she's the Frank Baum. She's the spirit that's going through all these different experiences, seeking enlightenment. Her parents don't care about enlightenment. If anything, the parents would pay money to have that enlightenment shock the hell out of your head, because I'm pretty sure that once you become enlightened, there's a direct correlation to the amount of farm work that you might be willing to do without more protests. So that's the issue, is that she's enlightened.
Well, I don't know. You could be enlightened to do plenty of farm work, right? It's like if there's dishes in the
maybe
sink,
not as a
just go do
9-year-old
them.
girl coming
Good
right
point.
back from being enlightened. It's not like, all right, let's get back to these chores.
I'm thinking about my house. My in-laws, they're out of the house by 7 a.m. at the latest most days to go do farming, right? So my daughter's gone because it's a school, and my wife's usually off with her sister by that point, and I'm dilettanting up and then doing Occult Disney podcast. So yeah, no one's.
I'll definitely say that there's a very specific trend, especially in the early 1900s, but a lot of occultists, a lot of people that would find themselves in a theosophical society and talking about these things, they tended to be on the higher end of the class system, because most people didn't have time to sit around and just talk philosophy and esoteric wisdom, but also those books were really hard to come by. Like, you had to kind of spend a little bit to get some of these grimoires, especially before anyone even knew what they were. So I would just say, like, yeah, anyone that was like theosophical in the 1900s, they're probably not on a farm.
Yeah, I mean, again, Crowley was 100% a trust fund kid, Have a large bank account.
Did he bang his maid too when he was like too young
really,
to do
like
so?
12 or something? Yes, yes. So yeah, but yeah, he had the super religious father. So how do you rebel? You become Aleister Crowley, I guess.
Bang the maid.
So but yeah, so it's very difficult to do that. But then in a past society, I don't know, there is no what class is a shaman in a Aboriginal style society? I feel like shaman's kind of like outside the whole system.
Yeah, I wouldn't really consider that like high or middle or low class. Like, I mean, financially, like from the economic standpoint, a shaman would still likely just be lower middle class. Like, there's not many cultures where the shaman has like more material wealth, but they might have sort of political capital that doesn't translate as well into like the Western world, where, you know, the shaman can say something and everyone else will listen. I guess closest thing would be like a pastor at like a church in a small town, like whatever power they wield. Although pastors also, maybe they drive a pretty nice Cadillac sometimes, a little private jet here and there.
Well, you're getting to power churches now, mega churches,
Well,
right?
and we've got it worked out. Again, America kind of improves everything. So we don't have any of those poor shaman here. We just got rich televangelists.
Before we move to Oz proper, I just have two things I want to point out. One, should they have done it in black and white in Kansas? That would have made sense. No? Can you just not shoot in the 80s movies in black and white? I mean, obviously the color's nice, but I was
maybe if it started, are you saying like it starts black and white and then it transitions the color the same way that the original one does?
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting. Yeah, Oz has to be in color, even if it is just like burnt out brown for most of the time.
Maybe that would have helped with the juxtaposition. So as you transitioned from sepia into mud with a little bit of green, maybe it would have popped a little bit more.
Yeah, maybe that's why they didn't do it, because it's not just Munchkin color blast. She's even like, where are the Munchkins? You know, they're not here. They should be here.
They're all dead. Everyone you know is dead.
Right, or turned to stone. Yes.
So, I mean, same difference, right? It's not like any of these characters that got turned to stone necessarily come directly back. Some of them do, but we don't see Lion come back. There's also a bunch of stone figures with their heads missing. That's kind of implied.
Now the head's missing, yeah, but I don't know if they can reattach those, because the heads are still alive in the headroom. But in the final scenes, you might have taken a little nap at the end of the movie, because you do see everyone in the Emerald City at the end.
Oh, do they bring the lion back at the very end?
You see the lion briefly. Again, it's not long, but that's why I was saying, I like the designs of the original characters that are not at all like the original. But
I really do. I don't know.
They're like the weird Tsum Tsum versions. They're like the Disney Tsum Tsum versions of the original characters. Or the
it seems important to be able to express and emote, though. Like none of these characters could necessarily emote whatsoever. In fact, the Scarecrow just has one face that's kind of plastered on no matter what he's doing. It looked like an actual Halloween costume that he was wearing. And I guess the same exact thing, even with the Tin Man, even with TikTok, with all the characters, they're just kind of stuck in these very specific poses. I don't know, like this was
makes more sense with the books. Makes more sense with the books, though, right? Makes sense, excuse me, because the books kind of are these totally bizarro friends she makes. You know, her friends are as creepy as her enemies in the books, which this movie goes for.
Maybe more so, yeah.
Yeah. The last thing I was going to say, were they about to electroshock her without putting anything in her mouth? She was about to lose a tongue.
I mean, that's just solving two problems at once.
Okay. Oh, right. Good point. Okay. But I noticed that. So I guess we should move on into Oz proper. We've been talking about Kansas. Let's talk about Oz some.
Sure. She shows up in Oz, and the first thing that she shows up in like the desert of death. I think that's what they call it. Or maybe it was the Deadly Desert. And if you touch the sand, you turn to sand. So it's kind of one of those fun, like don't step on the cracks game at first. And then
the floor is lava.
Yeah, the floor is lava. She comes up on a tree that is literally growing lunch pails. And they have to pick like a red ripe one versus a green unripe one. I wonder what would have been in one of those. But she picks a red lunch pail from the lunch pail tree, and there's a ham sandwich inside of it. I know this all seems like fever dreamish, but this comes directly out of the original Oz books. And in fact, there's this whole entire faction of people that are all named like Joe Egg and Joe Ham and Joe Sandwich and Joe Pail, and all of those people, whatever their last name is, they have a tree that grows those things. This is directly out of the Oz series.
Yeah, I think it's an extra surrealism that does make this movie become like creepy and fun for me. I've never had my lunch in a pail, by the way. That seemed a little weird. And if you want to experience this part of Oz, go visit the Oz village thing they built up in the mountains. I don't know if it's actually Georgia or North Carolina, but you know about the abandoned Oz theme park, yeah?
I've heard about that. I heard it was not a great place to go even after it opened and closed pretty quick. And they've made like other models of that on the East Coast and some theme parks, like little kids sections of that.
Yeah, but you gotta go to the old dilapidated one if you're a Return to Oz fan, right?
Are there lots of them out there? A lot of Return to Oz diehards out there?
Oh, it's all of these occult dark Disney. Excuse me, we do the occult Disney. All these dark Disney movies have ramped up a nice cult following. Black Hole definitely has one. People are into Vincent. It's not just you.
Vincent is awesome. Yeah.
The Watcher in the Woods is probably the one with the least cult status, but it still has
a movie with no villain doesn't seem to stick. Oh, crazy.
Something Wicked This Way Comes. They did a South Park episode based on it, right? Something Walmart This Way Comes. So that has some coattails, and this one does have one. I mean, come on, think of it. The early Hot Topic crowd would be into this, The modern one, maybe not, but the '90s when the Hot Topic opened, this is the right vibe. Nightmare Before Christmas was the perfect vibe, but this is 80% there. I'm
pretty sure I've seen a TikTok merch somewhere.
Yeah, Jack Pumpkinhead. How far away is that from Jack Skellington? Right, he dies, he becomes Jack Skellington. That's how it works.
It looks and he kind of has all the same mannerisms. Yeah, I was 100% getting Jack Skellington vibes from Jack Pumpkinhead.
Oh, for some creepy Disney, I just learned about this. Are you familiar with? Haunts, right? They got Universal Horror Nights, Fright Fest at Six Flags. Disney doesn't do it, but Hong Kong did for a couple years, where they had the Nightmare Experiment, where the fiendish doctor Professor Wu or something has brought the realities of Disney together, and you go rooms where it's like a man Pinocchio who's chained to the wall at Stromboli's. He's been a slave for Stromboli for however many years. You go into a room, the Mad Hatter's there and pulls a plant in the audience, pulls him into his room, the lights go out, and it seems that he murders one of the guests who is a plant. But yeah, it's just like really, that kind of stuff. So I'm like, to Return to Oz for that, sure. Room full of heads, there we go. I'll keep saying that.
Now, Disney does have something. I don't know if it's a technicality, it doesn't count, but it's Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween. And
the title makes it not count.
Of it. The title makes it not count. Okay. I mean, but it is what you would expect. It is like everything gets themed a little bit differently, but yeah, they don't have people chasing and making children cry in the middle of the park. It's a little bit anti-Disney brand.
Right. So the Nightmare Experiment is them doing something a little. I don't think it's full on like what you would get at Universal, but it's way more there than what they typically do. It only ran for 2 years, and then maybe someone, because Hong Kong Disney, I think, is still under more of like proper Disney jurisdiction, and someone's probably like, wait, what? Watching review time, like, what? No, stop this.
I gotta say,
the Mad Hatter cannot be killing guests.
This might sound a little bit weird, but I do feel that if I was one of those in-park characters, I would have way more fun scaring Japanese kids than American kids.
Well, that's what I'm doing this week because it's at my school. It's Halloween week, so that sometimes I go into the ghost room so the kids come get candy. So I, we got the black curtains, a weird like flickering red lamp thing. I put on one of the binaural beats, one of the creepier ones on my phone while I'm doing it. I get the black robe and I use the Cookie Monster voice. You will enter. And it's really fun when you got the really aggressive 6 and 7 year old boys and you make them cry and they won't go in. That's a win. So yes, what you're saying is correct. That's a win. I was depressed yesterday because we had 2 Halloween parties, right? And the first one I was not the ghost, and that had I was like, I wanted to make those 2 boys like cry from fear of my ghost.
Be a memorable experience. You're just like, typical teacher.
So yesterday I just got 4 kids that were all pretty cool with it, even though I was trying to creep them out.
And since this is a Halloween movie, Return to Oz takes place at Halloween. But I have to admit, like, this is an American Halloween, right? And almost all of these trends, this is my bias showing, but all of these like modern commercial trends and dressing up and throwing out candy, the way that it's done now, that feels like a modern American invention, like something that came out of the 20th century America. Despite all of the European roots and all of this, I feel like that was a completely it wouldn't even be recognizable compared to what we've got now.
Yeah, it's funny. especially in Japan, Halloween feels kind of like a new thing. So when we do the Halloween quiz, it's on TV, and I didn't make the question, so I don't know if I don't think the censor sounds quite right. But it's like, when did Halloween start? And the answers are 20 years ago, 200 years ago, or 2,000 years ago. And the kids always usually choose B. I don't think 2000 is actually correct, but that's what's in the quiz that someone made.
Yeah. I mean, it's maybe like one of those technically correct things.
Yeah, it's fine enough. The point is, I guess, to show the kids like this is actually quite old. You know, a few of them choose 20 years old because in Japan that's about correct. Japan didn't really start doing Halloween until 20 years ago. The first couple years when I was working in Japan and we had a Halloween party at the English school, I had a lot of difficulty finding a costume, whereas now it's quite easy. So,
well, you're welcome. That is definitely the American portion of Halloween.
Oh, it is. It's all just because people are like, "What's the point of Halloween?" I'm like, I don't know. It's kind of. I mean, I could sit there and start talking about like ancient rites and crap, but I'm just like, oh, it's just a goofy, fun holiday because I don't really feel like getting into that stuff with a 10-year-old Japanese kid.
And I guess at a deeper level, the real point of Halloween is it's almost a purge in a way, kind of like a purgy feel where it's your one time to maybe anonymously let that neighbor that everyone hates, maybe a pumpkin just ends up on their roof, or maybe some eggs
house.
Yes, someone is carrying Bellini, and Bellini starts shooting eggs at your house. It wasn't us; it was an accident. He was trying to take out the Gnome King.
Bellini burst. That's all. So no, I guess the Japanese equivalent is in August, which is the Bon holiday. Or you hear it as Obon a lot, which that one is where you're supposed to go to the family house. You burn some straw in the driveway or whatever, set up the family shrine in the main area. And the idea is the ghosts of your ancestors will be visiting for these 3 days. And then you take it all down and you make little animals. You put sticks and eggplants and cucumbers to make like cucumber horses and stuff and put it on the shrine. And I mean, it's a kind of a serious holiday. I just made it sound a little silly with the vegetable animals, but it's, it doesn't have any of the goofiness of Halloween, because people are sometimes like, oh, well, Obon's like the Japanese Halloween. I'm like, well, kind of, but you don't put on a dumb pumpkin helmet and run around scaring people for Obon.
I just for the record, I have absolutely been terrified at Halloween. I remember growing, but it was more of direct threats of real danger as opposed to being scared of masks. Like I remember that there was this group of teenagers that would hang out in the park and they would just be wearing just like normal teenager clothes, but then they all had Care Bear masks on, like the cheap Walmart ones. And they would literally chase down children and beat them up and steal their candy. Like this is what the teenagers preferred to do those nights. And that was absolutely terrifying seeing them walking towards you.
This is just for the YouTube crowd, if you can see it. But I do need to share this photo I just brought up of my 2017 Halloween ghost. It's pretty terrifying. I don't know if you can see that or not, but
you're wearing a hoodie and there's a mask under it, but I can't see what the mask is.
It's a pumpkin mask, but the way the photo exposed, you can't see the lines where my eyes are, so it comes out like insanely creepy. Maybe I'll put that in the Twitter feed or something for my scary Halloween ghost. But yeah, that's this movie's out to freak you out a little bit. Here's another thing. This is another like only get some people. This movie has a lot of creepy shots of liminal spaces. I feel like a whole lot of liminal space shots that just feel awkward. And they keep sprinkling them in too. Again, that's one of the things that helps it keep moving. Is it's like, oh, that's unsettling. Oh, that's unsettling too. Like it's nonstop things that have like a slightly creepy. They don't really jump out and scare you, but the whole movie definitely has does like an intentful way of making you feel unsettled. I mean, that's what The Shining does too. Murch, I don't think is a Kubrick level director, but that's something Kubrick does a lot too. Just sprinkle in those weird, unsettling, symmetrical shots of liminal spaces, and it adds a very unsettling feeling in The Shining. And that might be part of what adds to this. It's the scariest thing in The Shining, actually, that kind of thing, the unsettling parts that make the other parts feel creepier.
And they make a few different references to dismemberment and some kind of like darker concepts, which I guess would make this fairly dark movie. You mentioned all of the decapitated heads that this lady is keeping in her room. And in the book, they actually have like numbers. She's like, I'm going to put on number 27 or I'm going to put on number 13. So it implies that she has got a massive collection of these heads. It's not.
Well, they do that in this one too. She's number 31.
So it's way more because she actually mentions in this movie too that the heads where we see when Dorothy first comes into Oz and she's like, oh my God, everyone's turned into a stone now. And there's these 6 late like women that are kind of like playing Ring Around the Rosie or something. One of them has fallen over and all of them are missing their heads. And she notes that that's where those 6 heads came from. But yeah, if she's got 30 plus, there's a lot of gaps in exactly where all this came from. And in the original Oz books, that was kind of a consistent theme, is that Frank Baum would introduce all these different characters, but some of them like just would have not fleshed their backstories out at all. He would make like these crazy claims about like where they were at in life and all these like things they've had to overcome, but there's no backstory that kind of lets the readers, I guess, fill that stuff in. There's even a counterpart to Dorothy. I have to look her name up, but like for some sort of copyright or trademark reason, as he wanted to keep working, he wanted to keep the exact same story. So then he makes a girl that has like a mule instead of Toto, and then she has all these ancillary friends, which explain when you were mentioning like, oh, we've got a pumpkin guy and he's the scarecrow, and this one is that. That was not just a Disney thing; that was a Frank Baum thing, trying to work around trademarks.
Yeah. Oh, right. But I mean, that I think that's the thing on a lot of media. Like, if you're going to do something that feels like Scooby-Doo, you need to have like you need to have 5 characters that are analogous to the Scooby-Doo gang, right? And then people will subconsciously riff on that a bit. I mean, hey, Star Trek does that for every show, right? You're always, it's like, oh, this kind of fits this slot. This kind of fits this slot.
There was one, and I don't remember this from the original movie, but maybe it was in the original book. But she's talking about how the Tin Man kept cutting off parts of his body and replacing them with tin. He'd cut his arm off, replace it with tin, cut the other arm off until it was basically nothing left, except for like the one human part of him, like a Ship of Theseus style. But this also, since this is in the 1980s and they're talking about electroshock therapy and sort of trusting technology too much, they even explain that this electric healing machine, that your brain produces excess energy, and that just like any other machine, it malfunctions every once in a while. So you just got to kind of like bang it with some percussive, maintenance, I guess. But that one of those things that the Tin Man keeps cutting himself up, this almost feels like a cybernetic transhumanist vibe, especially again after you see the Wheelers coming in and off the scene. They talk about this guy keep chopping him up and replacing him with metal.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's book only, by the way. I do remember that being kind of shocking when I read that in the book. So I think he's just a Tin Man, right? He was not, not necessarily a person in the movie. So, but yeah, it's a creepier when it's like, oh, he's replaced everything, right? Is there a brain in there? He doesn't have a heart. We know that. So got rid of that.
And also some of the more direct threats is that when Dorothy first goes to that sanitarium and they strap her down to a bed, and you hear some like screaming in the background, and she sees Ozma. I guess she's got some weird telepathic connection with Ozma, almost like Watcher in the Woods style. Like she's got some connection with a girl from another realm that's trying to like guide her through all this. And Ozma's telling her that those moans are coming from people that got damaged during electroshock therapy, and they just lock those people in the basement. And that's where all these like moans and these noises are coming from. I thought that was kind of creepy. That was probably like the most real creepy thing, is that, oh, the things I'm hearing right now are people that had their brains scrambled by this thing that they're about to do to a 9-year-old.
Yeah, you get a 50-50 chance. It's cool. I mean, this is, I guess we have to say it or someone's going to be like, why did you bring that up? You could posit that it works and the whole Oz is a electroshock hallucination, but that's not fun. I don't actually like that theory on this movie. I'm like, nah, power went out. She went to Oz, and Oz is this freaky. I guess I insist on Oz being a real place in this one.
No, I agree on that, because I also think Frank Baum would have written this differently if it was actually supposed to be taking place like electroconvulsive therapy, because he goes to great lengths, and it comes across in this movie, but talking about how they're all trying to compare brains and machines. It's antithetical to like the theosophical approach. I think the theosophical approach probably wouldn't put as much stock in a machine being able to fix you, and like electricity itself being able to fix you. That these require these hero journeys, right? And to like go through all these like transmutations and alchemically changing yourself and doing the whole ritual of creating gold. And I think that's where it makes more sense, where they go into the earth and they have to mine these minerals. And even the minerals, the earth is like, you're stealing these things from me. And he's the gnome king. And just like in Snow White, that again, this Rosicrucian aspect where the gnomes are earth elementals and that they have no spirit, and that it's humanity that we're trading. We're saying like, oh, I like that gem, and in exchange for that gem, I'll give you a little glimpse of what consciousness looks like and what free will looks like. So I think that's Dorothy. Like, Dorothy is the free will in this whole entire thing. She also represents the feminine energy. And I'm not just saying that because she's a girl. The best example of this is that at the very end, when they basically bring down the Gnome King, spoiler alert, they bring down the Gnome King. It's because Bellini the chicken shoots an egg down his throat. Like Dorothy's holding the chicken lays this egg, which is notable because they make a point earlier in the movie that Bellini's not laying eggs. They're like, oh, mom's gonna roast you if you can't lay any eggs. She can't talk at that point to have some snappy comeback. I imagine that she said something, we just didn't hear it. But then as Dorothy's holding Bellini in Oz, the talking chicken now, and apparently this egg is the only weakness of the Gnome King. The Gnome King is basically made out of rock, impenetrable. But yeah, eggs are poison to the Gnome King, and lo and behold, Bellini shoots an egg. But the egg is the absolute symbol of like that feminine energy, the divine egg, this form of creation that the masculine can't create on its own. So that would be the antidote to this like sort of earth elemental, like this pure masculine energy entity that acts as the ultra villain in this movie.
Well, okay, I will try and tie in the 2024 Shogun series I've been watching, because here Dorothy goes to Oz. She's in a new world. And if you want to quote the Bruce Lee line, which comes from something else, I'm sure, is be like water. She just rolls with each situation, and, with like kind of just like being a little more reactive to the situations around her, feeling out what's happening. Where in Shogun, this guy ends up in Japan, and, he ends up in a reasonably decent situation, I guess. But despite himself, he's belligerent and horrible, and he almost, destroys himself 8 times or something, which he could have kept his mouth shut and rolled through it.
I'm not opposed to a combination of these two. A Return to Oz Shogun edition, where Dorothy is basically a samurai and just chopping down flying monkeys. That would be one of the cooler shows.
Oh, there's plenty of decapitations in that show too, by the way. So,
and yeah, but it has to be done by a 9-year-old girl from the 1900s. That's what really sells this.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good point. So, yeah, you can mash that stuff up. Hey, AI's getting to the point of being able to do that. You can make that movie.
They also have this one is weird. I could have sworn they said the head of a goat, but they were saying the head of a gump. And a gump is basically a moose, but a moose with a billy goat beard. So technically it is a goat. So they have this magical talking goat head that helps them fly and traverse this alternate dimension, which, I mean, let's just call a spade a spade. They're worshiping Baphomet, right? This is the goat of Mendes.
I was about to say, are they riding around on Baphomet?
100%. Yeah, they're sitting on Baphomet's hermaphroditic lap, and she is showing them new dimensions that they didn't know existed before. It's all sex magic.
I mean, that was the highest point of WTF for me in this movie, when they fly off on that thing, right? I'm like, wait, what? Huh?
Yeah. There's a scene, if you haven't seen, and in the book it's a sawhorse, but in the movie, I think it's like a couch or something. They basically affix this decapitated moose head, like one that's hanging on the wall. They don't just like find like a random moose head, but a head that's on the wall. It's a gump. It's a goat / moose, and they attach that to, I want to say, a love seat, and then they attach little plant palm fronds onto it, and then they sprinkle some sort of magic powder. I think it's just called like powder of life onto it, and they have to say 3 magic words. And this is totally getting like actual Theosophical at this point. And the words are Weog, Treog, Peog. And when you say those 3 words in that order, and you've affixed the power of this powder of life, then whatever inanimate object you put it on comes to life, essentially. So even without the head, it still would have worked. But I guess you need something to talk to.
Of course, if you're in our realm, you're going to need a cake of light to make that happen. But that's different.
That's very Crowley. Is that even Crowley, or is that pre-Crowley?
Oh, he definitely did it.
100%. But I think cake of light, even if they didn't have that term yet, that would have been one of the earlier black masses, because that's just an inversion of the Holy Eucharist, where they do basically Limp Bizkit on a Eucharist, right? Yes. That's cake of life.
Here's the other thing with that scene. Earlier, when Dorothy first meets the pumpkin, he's like, "Can I call you mom?" Which is a little creepy, and she says yes. That scene is the only time when he just calls her mom, like just in general dialogue.
And I could have sworn it wasn't Princess Mommy. It sounds like Princess Mommy, but it's Princess Mumby. But yeah. I almost feel like it was meant to sound like Mummy.
Maybe, yeah. I didn't make that, but maybe that's because again, I was doing my Halloween lesson yesterday, and Japanese kids cannot work out mommy and mummy. Like, they can't figure out that that's a different sound, so they're very confused when the mummy showed up.
And also, to make this just even more Crowleyan and Theosophical, in the book, there's more specific instructions. You can't just read those words. In the book, you have to raise your left hand with your little finger pointing upwards and say "Weog." So I guess like you're drinking tea or something. And then you have to raise your right hand with your thumb pointing upward and say "Teog." And then you have to raise both hands with all your fingers and thumbs spread out and say "Peog." So by doing that, bong, 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 that's what sort of enables this powdered life.
And you need to do this every day in a Highland shack for 6 months.
Right. And if another person that you come across is doing that, then you have to fight to the death, because there can only be one.
Yes.
And that's how the queen or the princess ends up getting all of her heads.
Right. Let's see. I wrote, damn, I think it. Oh, wait. I bet this movie really shines with some LSD in your bloodstream. And that's when they had the going down the rabbit hole sort of Alice scene, Willy Wonka river trip. That, of course, was my favorite scene in the movie because it was heavily psychedelic. So it was like I invoked that scene by writing, should watch LSD, and then it just got extra trippy for 2 minutes. So I really appreciated that. That's my favorite scene, because I like flashing colors on my TV.
That's actually a good question. If you had to take LSD and watch one of these Oz movies, would it be the original Oz or would it be Return to Oz? Which one of those would be a better LSD movie?
Probably this one, because it would be more confusing because I've only seen it once.
Fair point. I don't think there's a wrong answer to that.
Yeah. The correct answer is that you watch Galaxy Quest with the Thermidian language track on. Which I did.
What is that, like a Klingon style language that they
have you seen Galaxy Quest?
I have, just not on LSD.
If you remember, there's the aliens which mostly talk English, but every once in a while, there's on the DVD, at least the original DVD, there's a language track where Tim Allen is speaking that way, Alan Rickman is speaking that way, everyone is going through the entire movie, except when there's a brand name or something. So it'll be like Pepsi. So.
Oh man, I'm just trying to think of the other really realistic like drug scenes in movies. There was Train Spotting had one, Boogie Nights had one. Man, but there's another one where this guy like passes out in a bathroom and he starts like seeing things. We'll have to review that one. I'll have to figure out what it is. We could just do like a drug induced movie. If you do, go ahead. Do you remember what it is?
No, I was just saying. The Trip, Roger Corman's The Trip, is not entirely accurate, but it was made in 1967, and it's just like ridiculously psychedelic. It probably gets the actual trip part a little wrong. It's one of my favorite movies. I've seen Roger Corman's The Trip like a good 20 times. Stars Peter Fonda. It has Dennis Hopper in it. Bruce Dern's in it. Jack Nicholson is not in it, but he wrote the movie. So it's kind of like a proto Easy Rider in a way.
One of Disney's best movies, I think, Easy Rider.
That's right. Yes. Dennis Hopper is very cuddly.
There's the part when we start actually hearing more about the Gnome King, because originally it's just these weird rocks, and this is also, I think, gave me a little bit of Labyrinth vibes, because there's also like a rock character, I think, in Labyrinth, but also it's the Neverending Story. Also has like one of these big rock monsters where it slowly will go from a shot of rock to like a claymation rock talking and then back again. It also reminded me of how in Labyrinth she falls down that big tunnel of all the hands, and the hands turn into faces and they start talking, and then they go back into just hands again. Every time that you see all these rocks, and it almost seems like this is the Gnome King, kind of like a omnipresence throughout all of Oz now, because he kind of runs this entire dimension, and he goes onto a full-blown rant, and I'll just give you the highlight of the rant. But the point that he's making, he says, all the precious stones in the world are made here in my underground domains, all made for me by my gnomes. So imagine how I feel when someone from the world digs down and steals my treasure. All those emeralds in Emerald City belong to me, and I'm just taking back what was mine to begin with. So that was his justification for taking back over this whole realm. And it does make sort of an interesting point where it's, if you take this as that Theosophical Rosicrucian aspect, you're not supposed to, I guess, as a mundane human, extract this knowledge from the earth directly. Because again, in Snow White, she kind of employs the help of earth elementals, and it's the earth elementals that do all the mining and bring the emeralds directly to her in an even exchange. But in this case, the Gnome King in Oz is almost implying that there was no fair exchange here, that the earth never got to like experience any sort of human consciousness, and therefore he kind of sees all of this as stealing, that everything that happened in the Emerald City was all stolen because they got all of that without reaching enlightenment and earning it.
Yeah. The quote I wrote down, which I guess is the chaser to what you read, is "It's your fault for not asking." So that certainly stood out to me. You know, I'm like, oh, I guess that's how an elite would work, right? You didn't ask, so we can do it.
And in the book, it makes it the Rosicrucian and like the Theosophical aspect. It almost sounds alchemical, where Ozma's explaining more of this to Dorothy. And one of the quotes is that under his rule are thousands of gnomes, queerly shaped but powerful sprites that labor at the furnaces and forges of their king, making gold and silver and other metals which they conceal in the crevices of the rocks, so that those living on the earth's surface can only find them with great difficulty. So it's almost like they're the ones that are producing, like they are the underground alchemists that are doing all the hard work. And then when a person finds it, the person thinks that, you know, it was just always there, not realizing that there's all this extra alchemical activity in order to produce that to get there.
I mean, that's kind of a similar time book-wise as H.G. Wells' Time Machine, where you got the Morlocks doing all the work and the Eloi just kind of like dilettanting around on the surface. But when the Morlocks get hungry, they're perfectly fine to go and eat a few Eloi. They're easy to catch.
I mean, it does make more sense that if you could just snack on your slaves in addition to them doing all the work.
Well, the weird thing in Time Machine, the Eloi aren't really slaves; they're just cattle. You know, that's humans enjoying themselves, but they could be eaten at any time. Morlocks are doing the hard work under the surface. They can't really live on the surface anymore. So, I'm just kind of like drawing a line, being like, I guess that's kind of similar to this, alchemical Gnome King world versus the Emerald City.
Well, and the Gnome King, I think in the book, this doesn't come up in the movie, but they refer to everyone that's living on the surface as the upstairs people. I thought that was kind of interesting. Which it also is implying that aspect that they're kind of the enlightened ones, or they're the ones that have this consciousness.
One other thing we've been talking a bit about Labyrinth a year later. I was just checking out the date on Neverending Story, which is 84, a year earlier, although the book was written in 79, so that's a lot later. But there is this really specific, weird 80s fantasy vibe too. Willow has it, I would say. Legend. There's a few more, but yeah, there was something in the water, or something in this exact moment of special effects is probably more accurate. But
it was LSD also. That was what was in the water.
In the 80s, I think it was cocaine in the water, but yeah.
And you could get MDMA at the gas station in the 80s, I think, right?
Oh, I don't know, but hey, maybe. I don't know. I don't feel like it has an ecstasy bump, though. Yeah, who knows?
I don't know if you noticed this. I guess I have to point it out. And I don't know if it was intentional, but at the very beginning of this movie, there's a few times, even when Dorothy's in Kansas, she's talking and there's like a crazy echo, like a really strong delay. And I know it wasn't my audio setup, and I even got a couple different versions that I watched, and both versions had this exact same echo effect. I don't know if it was a product of ADR or overdubbing, or if it was intentionally trying to make some sort of point. It didn't seem like it was happening at any specific times. Did you hear that too, or was it just me?
Now you mention, I think I might have. Remember that the director, his main credit is as a sound designer. Apparently, the term sound design was created for him when he did Apocalypse Now. So I would say that's 100%.
You just intentionally adding a delay here and there, just like, yeah, go ahead and crank up that reverb.
Yeah, because this is the guy that first used automatic mixing boards for mixes, for some sound mixes of movies. I think he's the second guy to use Dolby. He's one of the first guys to do 5.1. So I'm gonna guess that was fully intentional. Okay. And if I were to guess why, I think it's just supposed to make maybe Dorothy's world seem a little more disoriented, because she's disoriented. She's sleep deprived, right? She's a little nutty. So, I mean, even, Oz is real in the world of this movie, but even then, she's still a little nutty at the beginning because she has intense insomnia,
Man, I assume that this is sort of flirting with public domain type stuff. I also want to see another sequel to this, but it's the version in which Dorothy does get electroconvulsive therapy and goes home, and now she's even crazier than when she originally went there, because she's got these very real experiences, but they've also kind of been zapped out of her mind. And then you just have to follow her through Kansas. I assume she turns into a serial murderer at some point.
Yeah. Hey, you could do that. These books, I mean, the rights thing's not an issue anymore. These books are all in the public domain. As long as you do not put in ruby slippers, you should be fine.
There's, I guess, one of the colorful scenes. There's only a few. There's the very ending scene, and then there's the scene when she goes into like the ornament room or the trophy room. And this
and falling down into that area, into the Gnome King's zone, is just, again, I love that psychedelic sequence.
Well, yeah, and you can see like all the little green emeralds, and like there's like a red light that's kind of glowing. It's very like a surreal aspect to it. But I was also wondering, when she gets into this little trophy room, there's this one scene that really freaking stood out, and they're kind of implying that she's winding TikTok back up. She's standing behind him, but she's like, I know where the freaking little crank is, and it's nowhere near where her hand is, and she just sits there, and her hand's kind of obscured from the camera, but she just keeps turning her hand like over and over again. And it seems like she's going through the motion of, I'm twisting this thing up, but how fast she's doing it, where her hand is at, the lack of any sound effects, it almost seemed like an oversight. And someone was like, yeah, just keep that cut. I don't know. Did you notice that either? It stood out so freaking much to me.
I noticed the winding, and I noticed it was too fast. I didn't notice the sound in that case.
And she wasn't it wasn't connected to anything. She was like kind of had her hand like over its shoulder, but then when TikTok turns and like scurries away a little bit, you can see that the only wind on his body would have been way down low. So if she were to be twisting it, you wouldn't have seen it, because it would have been cropped off by the shot. So I mean, I understand functionally why they might have, and maybe like, no one will ever see this. It's not like this is going to be in high definition or anything at any time.
I'm going to read a bit of the production stuff that's here on Wiki that says Balk and Ridley, who played Ozma, the only two child actors on set, had limited working hours each day. Balk, who was in around 98% of all scenes, was permitted to work no more than 3.5 hours a day, restricted to between 9:30 a.m. and 4:30 p.m., which included breaks and private educational tuition. So if it's a scene specifically with her, like you're describing, that might be, it's like, we got 10 minutes to finish this. Push, push, push.
Just kind of wiggle your arm around, honey. We'll get it. We'll figure it out in post.
Like maybe the prop was broken, right? And they're like, just look, make it look like you're doing it. And maybe hand acting is not her forte. So could be something like that.
And there was one other weird thing that I got. So that the hand thing, the weird echo that I guess seems like it might have been intentional now, and also at the very end they show it like the color changes completely, right? You even made that point. The rest of the movie's kind of muted tones, very dark. This last scene, it's like, oh, they do know how to make that same look that the original one had, except she says something like, oh, it's getting so bright. She makes this point, and all of a sudden you see the saturation and the lightness. They just boost the gamma or something, and it kind of like washes out. But the first scene when they show her, it's already washed out. The light is already like really high, and then they cut and it's back to like a normal level. And then she talks about it getting bright, and it slowly gets back up to where it started right there. So I don't know if that was a weird edit thing where they had the treated scene and it was already bright, but they put it before it starts getting bright, or if that was again like another intentional thing where it's like, we're going to show a glimpse of her, I guess, going back to this other dimension and then mute it back down again.
Yeah. I don't know. At that point, we've seen so many psychedelics. Like, yeah, show me something trippy and let's move on, right? So I was probably like, cool. And then, I do remember the brightening part, though, for sure. But I guess it's kind of like, here's where we're going, and now let's start over. I don't know, something like that.
It had like a Technicolor feel, like a classic Technicolor.
Oh yeah, that I love that last scene where it's weird diffused color and light, very direct, old, like someone was definitely knew how to light it like 1939. They just didn't do it for 90% of the movie because they want Oz to look disturbing and dilapidated, which it does. So but that's kind of like, hey, look, folks, we can do this if we want to, but we're trying to do something different. This is a different movie. I guess that's kind of how I read that scene. Like, we can do it, we're just not.
I might have fell into a weird time hole because I don't even remember the lion being in that scene, but I do remember that whole final scene that we're talking about maybe lasted a minute. Like it was very quick, like a very quick resolution.
Why does Dorothy want to go home in this movie, by the way? She might as well stay in Oz. In the original, it kind of made sense. And this one's like, stay in Oz, lady. You don't want to...
Well, I mean, this Oz is kind of a crappier Oz. It's definitely... There's a lot of cleanup. This is like post-World War II Oz, but you have to like build everything back up from scratch. But also Toto. She doesn't get Toto in this one. So, I mean, that seems like that would be the main reason to go back.
I guess so. Speaking of which... Toto did the soundtrack for 1984's Dune. They should have gotten Toto to do a soundtrack for this. What were they thinking? That would have made sense. The other point I wanted to make. Oh, yes. So Dorothy seems to be relatively, morally okay. But TikTok could easily be a killing machine with no remorse. If you're just like, we need to take out... You can see that with the Wheelers. Like, given a little time, you might have started like ripping them into pieces, But if you told TikTok, I want you to be a relentless killing machine against the gnome's forces, he's going to go do that. He doesn't care. Again,
in the Theosophical approach, TikTok, I think he represents that machine that was going to shock Dorothy. Like, he is the face. When they make the point, like, oh, look, here's the eyes, here's the nose. That's TikTok in the alternate dimension. So I guess Dorothy ends up using this technology for the forces of good, but theosophically, it's still just this dumb machine that has no morals. So yeah, absolutely could have been a killing machine. But Dorothy is the one that represents this good-natured consciousness of humanity. So when she interacts with it, it only works for good.
Right. Because even near the end, when it sheds a tear, it says right on him that he cannot do life. So that's just a show of like, this is maybe what you expect. So I'm going to give it to you.
I wonder what would
Maybe.
happen if she put the powder of life on him and did the little special little magic incantation. Because I mean, is a wind up robot considered an inanimate object? I assume inanimate just means anything that doesn't have like animus, like an actual spirit, not just that it animates and it moves around.
So technically, yeah, he would be an inanimate object. I think maybe I've never read that book, but I do wonder if the book itself has a little more thought on that, because that seems like something Baum would have been thinking about, and it's certainly good for a few paragraphs in your book.
Well, it makes me think too of Pinocchio, because technically, when the fairy godmother, maybe it's not a fairy godmother, but
the blue fairy,
when the blue fairy comes down and brings Pinocchio to life, there is like stardust. So maybe that she's actually using the powder of life from Baum's books, and that's all it is just this magical incantation along with the powder that brings inanimate objects to life.
Yeah, I mean, there's, obviously there's analogies to that. You can go many centuries back, and it's just a different name, right?
Is there always magic powder involved, though?
Okay, maybe not the powder, but some substance. There's often like this substance must be involved. That's when you're making your homunculus, you get some weird substances, right?
I prefer powder to adrenochrome, all things being equal.
Yes. What do you have else in your notes? Those are pretty much the last of things I wanted to shout out.
The last one that I had, it was kind of outside of the scope of this movie, but when I was looking more into the origin of these Wheelers characters, and that there's a scene, and I don't know if this was intentional. I assume that it was like a nod to this, but Frank Baum also wrote a weird Santa Claus story that kind of takes place in this tangential, like post-Oz world that we're experiencing now, but that Santa Claus was given his power and immortality from the Gnome King, and that Santa's sleigh and all the reindeer were replaced with these wheelmen, these wheelers. And there's even a scene in this movie when you see like an actual sleigh being pulled by the wheelers. So I almost felt like that was a nod to the existence of this weird Santa Claus book that didn't make it into canon. They don't say Santa Claus, but they 100% have a large wooden sleigh being pulled by these wheelers.
Is he buff? Is it like buff Santa Claus? I always love it when people do buff Santa Claus. And he's got the beard, but it's kind of like a mix between Poseidon and Santa Claus, You look up buff Santa Claus if you want. He's out there, but always fun.
I've seen the buff Santa Claus on a crucifix before, like a ripped Jesus Santa.
Yeah, that's my favorite Santa. Okay. If that's your last note, I guess we'll wind this one down and head back for Kansas. I've never been to Kansas, but whatever.
We're winding TikTok back down.
I think I could have gotten Kansas to do the soundtrack. They were still rocking in '85. Where do you rocking at the end of October here?
Well, I'm actually getting prepped to go and do a live show, but it would have already have happened by the time that this is airing anywhere. Because it's happening tomorrow, but something called Bohemian Grove. It's going to a whole bunch of live stand-up comics and stuff. I'll probably post some videos of it for anyone that misses it. I'll be launching a few new cool play sets and products and stuff. I'm doing everything that I can to try and get a psychedelic Santa play set out. I don't know if I mentioned this the last time we were talking. I've got a prototype. It's not super pretty yet, just because I don't have the full backing made. And there's like little lights that go on here, but if you can see it close enough, there is like a tripping Santa Claus in the background of the backer card. And the items here is reindeer pee, a Santa with a little bag, a reindeer, and an Amanita muscaria mushroom in the corner there. And it lights up, and it's got like some fake snow in it and stuff, but yeah, the psychedelic Santa play set. And I've also been working on one. I don't think I have the prototype in front of me, but it's in Terminator Abraham Lincoln that I'm calling AI Abraham Lincoln. And he's fighting a whole bunch of Civil War guys. Like he's fighting Southern Civil War soldiers, but he's from the future. So that's another fun one that I got coming out. If you want to look at those, you can see them on paranoidamerican.com, hopefully now or in the near future. And my other huge project that's been going really well, I'm going to add another 20 cards to it by the end of this year, is conspiracycards.com, which are basically collectible cards that look just like the most iconic designs from the 80s and 90s. Donruss Score, Upper Deck, Tops, all of those designs have kind of readapted them, but now you're going to get a Alex Jones or an Isaac Cappy, or if you're really lucky, you'll get a Werner von Braun with like a little Pirates outfit. It looks just like a Barry Bonds rookie card, but it's Werner von Braun, the guy that didn't do steroids, if you don't know who that is.
I get the von Brauns down, yeah. I was actually formulating my pitch in your mind when you were saying the last part. I was just thinking of all the 80s fantasy movies I have done podcasts for before. If you head for what is currently Films and Filth on any of your podcatchers, I know in that feed you will find us talking about The Neverending Story, The Neverending Story 3. Legend is in there. Trying to remember if there's any other good weird 80s fantasy we did. There might be another one or two I'm just forgetting, because we've now been doing that podcast for 5 years. So, you forget what you did after a while. But that's Films and Filth. I mentioned The Twilight Zone. If you want to hear me trying to do Mickey Rooney commentary impressions, that was last week's episode, and that is Time Enough Podcast. So that seems.
And just for the record, this concludes at least this year's Dark Disney, but that means that from the 1930s through the 1980s, we've seen the scariest things that Disney has had to produce so far, right?
And I didn't do much at all.
If you didn't include any Touchstone movies,
look up Fuzz Bucket. That might disturb you.
Fuzz Bucket?
Yeah, Fuzz Bucket. That's for the listener too. Look up Fuzz Bucket. It'll disturb you. It was a 50-minute Disney Channel movie, and Fuzz Bucket is pretty disturbing.
From the 80s or earlier?
It's like 85. Technically, we could go one more, but I think we're going to take a short break, because I'm not going to make you podcast on Halloween night, and we'll be back in 2 weeks at least, recording time with Pooh's Heffalump movie, which I guess is a different kind of nightmare.
I've got some good notes on that one. We're going right back into MK Ultra all over again.
All right, just like today a little bit.
Look, you're gonna have to move fast. Conspiracy cards from Paranoid American are here. Conspiracy cards, flip it, what's the deal? Conspiracy cards with that paranoid seal. Pack it, unwrap it, truth in these stacks. Flip one, flip two, get a few of these packs. Flip it up, what's next? Move fake, we flex. Bigfoot in the woods, stay lying, that's facts. MK Ultra, no cap. Every yacht 51 is a trap. Roswell crash, what's that? They hide the truth, where's that? Conspiracy cards, flip it, what's the deal? Conspiracy cards with that paranoid seal. Pack it, unwrap it, truth in these stacks. Flip one, flip two, get a few of these packs.
That's right, Conspiracy Cards from Paranoid American. A set of over 200 cards featuring legendary conspiracy theorists, cult leaders, esoteric secrets, and more. For more details, visit conspiracycards.com today.
Paranoid. Yo. I scribble my life away, driven to write the page. Will it enlighten your brain? Give you the flight, my plane, paper the highs ablaze. Somewhat of an amazing feel when it's real to real. You will engage it. Your favorite, of course, the Lord of an arrangement. I gave you the proper results to hit the pavement. If they get emotional, hate, maybe your language, a game, how they playing it well without Lakers. Evade them, whatever the cost, they are the shapeshift. Snakes get decapitated, met is the apex. Execution of flame you out, nuclear bomb distributed at war, rather gruesome for eyes to see. Max them out, then I light my trees. Blow it off in the face, you're despising me for what though? Calculated and rather cutthroat. Paranoid American must be all the blunt smoke for real. Lord, give me a day away, vacate. They wait around to hate whatever they say. Matters not in the least bit. We get heavy rotate when a beat hits, so thank us, you're welcome. Fuck the niggas for real, you're welcome. They ain't never had a deal, you're welcome. Man, they lacking appeal. You're welcome. Yet they doing it still. You're welcome.